So I'm driving and thinking about AI, as one does, because I had a fantastic discussion today with a friend of mine about AI and what a powerful and useful tool it is in so many ways, and how it's permeated our life and how there's no going back, just like with the internet, and how it affects human thinking and all this stuff. And it got me thinking about, especially right now, art and AI art versus human art. What is the difference between AI art and human art? Like, fundamentally, like, why does it matter? Why do some people refuse to consume AI art or consider it art even? And I think there's a couple of main points of distinction here. I think the main points of distinction here are perspective, veridicalness versus representation, and perfection. So this first distinction of AI art versus human art is this element of perspective. Human beings see the world, right? At every movement forward, at every turn, at every angle of our heads, we have a different perspective of the world. I wear glasses and someone else doesn't, and when I take off my glasses, I have a different view of the world. On a foggy day, on a hot day, on a tired day, a day when I'm super foggy and groggy versus a day when I'm really sharp and alert. Two different perspectives of the world, different views of the world physically. And, we can talk about, like, light rays and, like, bouncing off of objects and, like, da-da-da-da, like, cornea and all that stuff. AI or computers don't have a perspective on the world. They are fed our perspectives. AI is fed and given representations of the world, our representations of the world, depictions of our perspectives. And from those perspectives, it culminates a new image and gives it to you. If you can even call it a new image. I don't think you can even call it a new image because it's not new. It's a derivative of everything it's consumed. And that's sort of the other element to that I would add. I don't know if it fits into any other categories. Everything AI puts out, as far as we know, pretty sure, is derivative of images. And you can argue that everything we put out is also derivative of images that we've seen in the world. But I guess you can argue that. Yeah. So maybe, like, the derivation isn't the important part here. And you can argue that is AI's perspective, but my point here is AI's perspective derives from our perspective, and AI doesn't go outside and look at a flower and form a concept and an image of a flower in its mind or in its database or in its pixels, in its data. It takes our depiction of a flower, our perspective of a flower, and creates an image of a flower that way. So I hope I drew that distinction well and correctly and sufficiently. That is number one. Number two distinction between AI and human art, human-made art, is this idea of veridicalness versus representation, which I guess I sort of touched on in the last point about the way everything AI, since it's like a language learning model, like it's, as an example, let's say, it's not coming up with sentences, it's calculating, it's predicting the probability of what the next word is going to be based on all of the language it's consumed. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, AI art works in a similar way, just not with words. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm correct, and that is how AI art works, it's the same way that, like, ChatGPT and language learning models work, then all art is derivative of the things it consumes. But in the same way that our brains don't work like a language learning model like AI does, at least I don't think. Someone can definitely make that argument, but I think they would be wrong. Not the topic for this video right now, I'm going to be honest with you. In the same way that language for us is a little more artistic, it's a little more chaotic, it's a little more creationary, the images that we put out as well, like, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect depiction of a flower. And this is also going into the next point, but how this connects to veridicalness versus representation is, once again, AI's output, AI art, is representation of things based on our input versus our veridical experience of the world. Our art is based on the things that we see with our eyes. So I guess this sort of ties into the first point. So maybe I'm not going to distinguish those two as separate points. But anyway, I do think the third point, which is perfection and imperfection, is important. So that is definitely a separate point from this whole veridical reality perspective that we take versus this representation language model-esque perspective AI takes. The other point, perfection and imperfection. I see a flower. There's now an image in my head of this flower, this pansy, that I can sort of like close my eyes and like conjure up a little bit. And then I take my imperfect tools, you know, like the brush that has some paint on it, less paint, more paint, less water, more water, you know, whatever. I try to make the color as good as possible. And then I, with my imperfect skills, with my imperfect tools, try to relate or convey this vague image in my head that I have of this thing that I saw earlier into the physical world. It's a very imperfect process, and that's sort of the whole essence of art. AI's is not that. We feed it 10,000 images of a pansy, and it has a pretty good freaking idea of what a purple pansy looks like. You know, like it can give you a purple pansy with a purple that is highly likely the same exact purple that pansy was. The shape that is highly likely going to be the same exact shape. Like some AI art, you can't even distinguish it from real life because that's how good it is. So that sort of perfection element of AI, like it being literally a derivative of the real thing in a way that's more physically copy-paste than our mind is, gives it this element of perfection that human art very rarely has. I don't think art has ever strived for perfection. Yes, there are styles of art such as realism and hyperrealism and that strive for this like super veridical representation of reality and as art movements. And there was the Renaissance that sort of tried to make art be a little more realistic, a little more real, right? Using perspective, using foreground, background, all this stuff. But once again, these are styles of art that are done by some people sometimes. It's not like all art, all styles of art, every artist is trying to create art in this way. It's not something that everything is moving towards. It's a type of art. And also in this Renaissance, when we're trying to create this image of reality that's more realistic than in previous art styles, once again, it's depicting human perspective. This imperfect, raw reality that's hitting me in the eyes that I am then portraying, rather than copy and pasting a physical entity that has entered my mind out into the world. The input-output process of human art and AI art is very distinguishable, and I think that is the essence of what differentiates the importance of AI art versus human-made art. And some might argue that none of these explanations are sufficient to justify why AR isn't real art, why AR isn't good enough, or as good or as important as human art. That's a completely different, that's a normative question. That's a value question. I'm simply trying to depict or explain the difference, the fundamental ontological difference between human-made art and AI-made art. And it is these elements of, and they all sort of tie in together. So like, it's hard to really flesh them out as separate points a little bit, but perfection and imperfection. Representation versus a veridical perspective versus, a copy-paste derivative image. So I hope I sort of explained that sufficiently. Those are just sort of some preliminary ideas I've been having about art. And obviously, I can probably go and read so much about art, tonight on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Adorno, Aristotle, all these people, probably many modern philosophers that are currently talking about AI. I wonder if David Chalmers has spoken about art. I know he does talk consciousness, but yeah, but those are just some preliminary, armchair philosophy thoughts. Yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your perspective is, because this is what we do here, all right? We philosophize, we think, we express, we explain, and then we refine and research and, you know, finalize the arguments. But that's what philosophy is, baby. It's thinking and exploring thoughts and expressing. So if you have any thoughts about AI art versus human art, the difference, the importance, is AI art? What is your definition of art? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you soon. Bye.